A sheik was pulled over by a cop, but she recognized him and realized something incredible. Let me know what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain hammered the asphalt of Ocean Drive like stray bullets, creating small bursts of water that reflected the neon lights of South Beach's luxurious hotels. Ethan Hayes adjusted the rearview mirror of the black Porsche 911 and accelerated more than he should have, feeling the familiar adrenaline coursing through his veins. At 32, he had learned that speed was more than an addiction. It was a metaphor for the life he had chosen to live. Always on the edge, always one step ahead of the law, always fleeing ghosts that insisted on chasing him in the lonely early hours of Miami. The custom-made Armani suit was slightly wrinkled after a long meeting in one of his offices in South Beach, where million-dollar figures danced between offshore accounts and front companies with the same elegance with which he handled a glass of Lebanese wine. The Sheik, as he was known in Miami's financial underworld, had turned money laundering into a refined art. Son of Mahmoud Hayes, who had arrived from Lebanon with a suitcase of dreams and an unshakable determination, and Mary Jo, an American who had fallen hopelessly in love with the young immigrant, Ethan grew up navigating between two worlds that rarely touched. His childhood in Little Havana, in a modest apartment where the smell of kibbeh mixed with the sound of American television, seemed to belong to another life. He remembered the afternoons at his grandmother Nazira's house, a small but fierce woman who spoke Arabic when she was nervous and English when she wanted to show affection. It was there he had met Maya, his grandmother's friend's granddaughter, a girl with huge, curious eyes who called him Cousin Ethan, and asked 1,000 questions about Lebanon, about the strange words he sometimes murmured, about why his eyes were green when hers were not. The sound of a siren brought him back to reality with the brutality of a punch to the gut. Blue and red lights danced in the rearview mirror, reflecting in the rain that ran down the rear window like neon tears. Ethan gradually reduced his speed, his brain already calculating probabilities, escape routes, plausible stories. 3 years without a police stop hadn't been luck. It had been meticulous care, well-placed bribes, and a flawless business facade that included donations to orphanages and participation in the Lebanese community's charity events. He pulled over near South Point Park, where the rough sea seemed to mirror the storm that was beginning to form in his chest. 2 police officers approached the car, flashlights in hand, as the rain continued its relentless assault on the asphalt. Ethan lowered the window with the rehearsed calm of someone who had been through similar situations, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel, his breathing controlled, his expression neutral but respectful. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" The voice came out firm, with no trace of the nervousness that was beginning to grow in his stomach. He knew this dance well. Documents, routine questions, maybe a superficial search of the vehicle. Nothing his connections and his lawyer couldn't resolve by morning. But then, a third figure approached the group, and Ethan's world crumbled with the force of a silent tsunami. Special Agent Maya Jones walked with the upright posture of someone who had grown up fighting for every inch of respect in a profession dominated by wealthy white men. At 28, she had turned every no she received into fuel to prove that a black woman from Overtown could not only survive in the FBI but thrive. The rain ran down her coily hair, tied in a flawless bun, soaked the dark blazer she wore like armor against institutional sexism, and made her skin shine under the streetlights like polished bronze. She was there by coincidence. An investigation into suspicious financial movements in the area had brought her to coordinate a routine operation with the Miami-Dade PD. She didn't expect to find anything more than another playboy driving drunk after a night in the bars of South Beach. She certainly didn't expect her entire life to shatter upon recognizing the face of the man sitting in the black Porsche. "Maya?" Ethan's voice came out as a broken whisper, carrying 3 decades of longing and remorse. "Maya, is that you?" Her heart stopped. It literally stopped for a second that seemed to last for hours as her brain struggled to process the impossible. Those green eyes, that deep voice with a slight accent she could never identify in childhood, that crooked smile that appeared when he thought no one was looking. It was him. It was really him, Ethan. The name left her lips like a prayer and a curse at the same time. Cousin Ethan. The police officers looked confusedly at each other, not understanding the electric tension that had settled between the federal agent and the driver of the luxury car. Maya gestured for them to step back, her authority never in doubt, even as her inner world collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. "You told me you were dead." The words came out as an accusation, heavy with 2 decades of unprocessed pain. "Grandma Nazira said you died in an accident. The whole family said so." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every lie he had allowed to be told, every phone call he hadn't returned, every Sunday he had chosen not to show up at his grandmother's house because his presence could put everyone in danger. When he opened them again, he met the raw pain in Maya's eyes and knew he had found something worse than prison. He had found the disappointment of the only person in the family who still mattered to him. "I had to disappear, Maya. I had to protect you all." The explanation sounded pathetic, even to his own ears, but it was the closest truth he could offer at that moment. "Protect us from what?" Her voice was firmer now. "The agent taking control over the wounded child. What did you need to protect us from, Ethan?" And it was in that moment, with the rain falling relentlessly on them both and the rough sea as a witness, that Maya finally understood. The man before her was no longer the dear cousin of her childhood, the one who brought her baklava and taught her words in a beautiful, mysterious language. He was Ethan Hayes, the businessman she'd been investigating for 3 years. He was the financial arm of one of the most sophisticated criminal organizations in Miami. He was the ghost she had been chasing through suspicious bank transfers, shell companies, and a complex web of corruption that stretched throughout South Beach. He was the man she had sworn to bring to justice. The mutual recognition created a dense silence between them, charged with untold history and yet to be calculated consequences. The girl who dreamed of arresting the bad guys was facing the man who had become exactly what she had promised to fight. The cousin who loved her like a younger sister was facing the woman who had the power to destroy everything he had worked for over the past 15 years. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets, but failing to cleanse the past that had just resurfaced between them like a ghost thirsty for justice. The 2 weeks following the encounter on Ocean Drive passed like a slow, meticulous torture for both of them. Maya couldn't focus on anything other than the devastating implications of that discovery. Sitting at her desk on the 14th floor of the FBI building, surrounded by piles of case files and financial reports, she stared at the folder containing 3 years of investigation into Ethan Hayes without being able to open it. Every document inside now had a face, a voice, a personal history that connected her irrevocably to the man she was supposed to arrest. The apartment in South Beach she shared with her younger sister, Jasmine, had become a minefield of memories. Every object that reminded her of childhood, the few family photos, the baklava she sometimes bought out of nostalgia, even the perfume she wore that vaguely reminded her of Grandma Nazira's house. Everything now carried the bitter weight of family betrayal. How could they have lied to her for so many years? How could they invent a death, create a period of mourning, make her cry for someone who was alive, building a criminal empire just a few miles away? The anger burned in her chest like acid, corroding her ability to think clearly. On sleepless nights, she paced her living room like a caged animal, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. Ethan wasn't just any criminal. He was family, her blood. The man who had taught her to count to 10 in Arabic, who always brought her gifts on her birthday, who defended her when the other cousins teased her for being too different, too questioning, too stubborn for a girl. The most painful memory always came back in the early hours. The last time she had seen him, shortly before the supposed accident. She was 8 years old and crying because she had fought with her mother about not wanting to go to school. Ethan showed up at her grandmother's house, as he always did on Sundays, found her hidden under the kitchen table, and sat on the floor beside her. "Maya," he said in that affectionate voice that now haunted her, "do you know why I like you so much?" She shook her head, sniffling. "Because you never accept things as they are. You always want to understand, always want to change what isn't right. One day you're going to be a very powerful woman, and you'll use that brave heart of yours to make the world a better place." How could he have said that, knowing he was already choosing the path that would make him exactly the kind of person she was meant to fight? Ethan, for his part, was living his own torment. The penthouse on Fisher Island, which once represented the ultimate symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage where every luxury reminded him of the price he had paid to achieve it. He walked through the immense rooms decorated by renowned architects, looked out at the panoramic view of the city he dominated from its businesses to its skyscrapers, and felt an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. The image of Maya on that rainy night wouldn't leave his mind. The curious and brave girl had transformed into a strong, determined woman, exactly as he had always known she would. But she had also become his professional enemy, the person designated by fate to destroy everything he had worked for. The irony was too cruel to be just a coincidence. In the first few years after leaving his family, Ethan managed to convince himself that he had made the right decision. His initial involvement with small-time financial scams had quickly escalated to increasingly complex and dangerous operations. When he realized there was no turning back, when the threats began to include people close to him, the only solution he found was to disappear completely from the lives of everyone he loved. He had let them invent the story of the accident because it was easier for everyone to process a death than a betrayal. But seeing Maya that night, hearing the pain in her voice when she said, "You told me you were dead," made him question every decision he had made in the last 20 years. Maybe there had been other ways to protect his family. Maybe his cowardice had disguised itself as nobility all this time. The first attempt at contact came via a note left on the windshield of Maya's car in the agency's parking garage. Just an address and a time, handwritten in a script she recognized immediately, the same one that used to write Arabic words on napkins to teach her during Sunday lunches. Versailles Restaurant, Little Havana, Thursday, 3 p.m. "I need to explain, please." Maya tore the note into 1,000 pieces, threw it in the trash, and tried to pretend it meant nothing. But on Thursday at 3 in the afternoon, she found herself walking through the streets of Little Havana towards the historic restaurant, unable to explain to herself why she had given in to curiosity. Ethan was at a table in the back, away from the windows, wearing a simple dress shirt with no tie, a far cry from the impeccable image he cultivated publicly. When he saw her enter, he stood up automatically, as he had been taught in childhood, but realized the absurdity of the gesture and sat back down, embarrassed. Maya approached the table with the rigid posture of someone there on business, not for family affection. "You have 5 minutes to talk," she said, remaining standing, her hand never leaving the purse where she carried her service weapon. "And if you try anything, I'll arrest you right here." "I know you hate me," he began, his voice deeper and more tired than she remembered. "And you have every right. I lied, I disappeared, I let you suffer thinking I was dead. But you need to know that every day away from the family was hell for me too. Spare me the self-pity, she cut in. You chose a life of crime. Nobody forced you to become what you are. No, he agreed, looking down. Nobody forced me, but when I started, it was just to help. Dad was sick, Mom was working 3 jobs to pay for his medicine, Grandma Nazira needed surgery, and the state-funded program had a 2-year waiting list. A friend offered me easy money to make some bank transfers. It seemed simple, harmless. And then you discovered you had a talent for crime, she said with sarcasm. Then I discovered I had a talent for numbers, he corrected her, and that dangerous people were willing to pay very well for that talent. By the time I realized what I was into, it was too late to get out. I had too much information, knew too many people. They made it clear that any attempt to leave the organization would result in consequences for my family. So you preferred to be dead to us rather than tell us the truth. I preferred for you to hate me in death than for you to be at risk because of me. The silence that followed was dense, filled with 20 years of accumulated resentment. Maya finally sat down, not because she accepted his explanations, but because her legs began to tremble with the emotional weight of the conversation. You know I've been investigating you for 3 years, she said after a while. I know. And I also know you're good at what you do. Very good. Then you know I'm going to arrest you, I know. He looked her directly in the eyes for the first time since she had arrived. But before that, I want to give you something. Ethan slid a small flash drive across the table. Everything you need to dismantle the entire organization is on here. Names, accounts, operations, corruption schemes, everything. Maya looked at the object as if it were a venomous snake. Why would you do this? Because you were right that night. I became exactly the kind of man, the brave little girl you were promised to fight. And because maybe, by doing the right thing now, I can reclaim at least a little of the person I was when you still called me Cousin Ethan. The offer hung between them like a ticking time bomb. Maya knew that accepting that flash drive meant crossing a dangerous line, becoming an accomplice to a criminal, even if it was to arrest him. But she also knew that the information on it could dismantle a corruption network she had been chasing for years without success. And what do you want in return? She asked, still not touching the device. A chance to redeem myself in the eyes of the only person in the family who still matters to me, he replied. A chance to prove that there's still something of the man you loved left in me. Maya took the flash drive and put it in her purse without a word. She stood up to leave, but stopped before walking away from the table completely. If you're lying, if this is some kind of trap, I will destroy you, she said without looking back. And if you're telling the truth, I'm still going to arrest you. The difference is, in the second case, I might feel some remorse. Ethan was left alone at the table, watching her disappear into the downtown crowd, knowing he had just placed his life in the hands of the one person who could either save him or destroy him completely. The contents of the flash drive were an atomic bomb in the world of organized crime in Miami. Maya spent 3 consecutive nights in her apartment, hunched over her laptop, analyzing every file, every spreadsheet, every document that Ethan had meticulously compiled over the years. It was a complete file of his own conviction, names of bought judges, corrupt agents, politicians on the take, businessmen who laundered money through their corporations, a network so complex and well-articulated that she had to take notes in a separate notebook just to map all the connections. But what disturbed her most was discovering that Ethan had documented his own activities with an almost obsessive precision. Every illegal transfer, every laundering operation, every dirty dollar that had passed through his hands was recorded there as if he always knew he would one day be held accountable for it all. It was as if he had spent years building his own criminal case, waiting for the day someone would come to collect. On the 4th morning, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She called Ethan from a payphone in South Beach. far from the wiretaps she suspected were on her personal and professional lines. "We need to talk," she said when he answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting for the call. "But not downtown, somewhere we can have privacy. Did you look at everything?" "I did. And now I understand why you disappeared from the family. This shit is much bigger than I imagined." Ethan suggested a discreet Middle Eastern restaurant in Wynwood, near the neighborhood where they grew up, a place where they could talk without drawing attention. When Maya arrived, she found him at a table in the back, more tense than the last time. There were dark circles under his green eyes, evidence that he hadn't been sleeping either. "You know that using this information means I'll have to officially arrest you," she said as soon as she sat down, without preamble. "There's no way to protect you from what's on this flash drive." "I know," he replied calmly. "Actually, that's what I was hoping for. Why? Why do you want to be arrested?" Ethan was silent for a moment, nervously fiddling with a gold ring on his little finger, an heirloom from his paternal grandfather that Maya vaguely remembered seeing him wear in childhood. "Because I'm tired," he said finally. "Tired of living a life that isn't mine. Tired of looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. Tired of carrying the weight of every crime I've committed for the last 20 years. And because I found out there's something worse than prison. What? Knowing that the most important person in my family hates me for what I've become." The confession hit Maya like a punch to the stomach. She had prepared for anger, for manipulation, for attempts at emotional blackmail. She hadn't expected genuine vulnerability. "I don't hate you," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "I hate what you did. I hate the choices you made. I hate that you lied to us for so many years. But I can't hate you completely because I still see traces of the man you were." "And is that enough?" "I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out." Their meetings became regular after that. Twice a week, always in different places. Always with the professional excuse that Maya was cultivating a high-value informant. Technically, it was true, but the line between work and personal life grew blurrier with each meeting. Ethan provided detailed information about ongoing operations, allowing her to anticipate and intercept illegal money shipments. In return, she gave him updates on the investigation's progress and warned him about police movements that could compromise him. It was a dangerous game that both knew couldn't last forever. During one of these meetings, in a discreet steakhouse in the northern part of the city, Ethan told her about the day he decided there was no turning back. "It was when they killed Casey," he said, referring to an accountant who had tried to leave the organization years earlier. "He had a daughter your age at the time, 8 years old. They didn't touch her, but they made it clear they would if he didn't come back to work. When I saw what they did to him for trying to protect his family, I understood that the only way to protect you all was to disappear completely. You could have told us," Maya argued. "We could have found a solution together. With what money? With what protection?" "Maya, back then your father was still alive and working as a security guard for minimum wage. Your mother cleaned houses for rich ladies in South Beach. Grandma Nazira needed a surgery that cost more than your family earned in 2 years. You couldn't help me, and I couldn't risk you paying the price for my choices." It was during these conversations that Maya realized how Ethan had carried the weight of protecting the family alone, even if in a distorted way. His initial motivations had been genuine, even if the outcome was catastrophic. The physical attraction that grew between them was something neither of them wanted to admit. Ethan had become a handsome man, with the kind of confidence that only power and money could give. Maya had blossomed into a stunning, strong, and independent woman, exactly the type of person who had always attracted him. But the chasm between their current realities made any possibility of a romantic relationship not only inappropriate, but potentially destructive for both of them. Until the night everything changed. Maya had just come from an operation that resulted in the seizure of $2 million in cash, information that Ethan had provided. She was exhausted, adrenaline still coursing through her body, when she received a call from him saying he needed to see her urgently. Something in his voice alarmed her. There was a panic she had never heard before. They met on a secluded stretch of beach near Key Biscayne, where there was rarely any traffic. Ethan was leaning against his car, smoking nervously, a habit she didn't know he had developed. "They know," he said as soon as she approached. "Know what?" "About our meetings, about the information I've been giving you. Someone in the organization suspects we have an inside informant, and they're starting to investigate. It's a matter of time before they get to me." Maya's stomach dropped. "How do you know?" "Because they called me for a meeting tomorrow night, the kind of meeting people usually don't come back from. Then we'll put you in protection, witness protection program, new identity, you'll be safe and—" "No," he cut in. "I'm not running away again. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, hiding being someone else. I did that once, and it destroyed everything I loved." "Then what do you want to do?" "I want you to arrest me," he said, flicking the cigarette butt into the sand. "Officially, publicly, tomorrow morning, before the meeting. If I'm in police custody, they can't touch me. And you'll have time to use all the information from the flash drive to dismantle the entire operation. Ethan, that means prison, real prison, for a long time." "I know." He moved closer to her, closer than he had since they were children. "But it also means I'll finally be able to look in the mirror and see someone that the brave 8-year-old girl wouldn't be ashamed to know." The sea breeze played with her hair, and for the first time since they had reunited, Maya saw not the criminal he had become, but the man who had always existed beneath all the layers of protection and lies. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." That's when she realized she was in love with him. Not with the cousin from her childhood, not with the memory of what he represented, but with the complex, tormented man standing before her, willing to sacrifice his freedom to do the right thing. The realization hit her with the force of a tidal wave, leaving her breathless and completely unprepared to deal with the implications of what she felt. "Maya," he said softly, as if he could read her thoughts. "I know this is crazy. I know it makes no sense. I know the timing couldn't be worse. But I need you to know that I fell in love with you. Not with the girl you were, but with the incredible woman you've become." Before she could answer, he was already walking away, back to his car. "Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, he shouted over his shoulder, "at the Federal Building. I'll be there waiting." Maya was left alone on the beach, the sound of the waves mixing with the rapid beat of her heart, knowing that in the morning she would have to arrest the only man she had ever allowed herself to feel something real for. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat on her apartment balcony, looking at the city lights stretching to the horizon, trying to process Ethan's confession and her own conflicting emotions. At 5 in the morning, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She called her section chief and informed him that she had obtained enough evidence for a major operation to begin at 9 o'clock that morning. When she arrived at the Federal Building at 8:30, Ethan was already there, waiting on a bench outside as he had promised. He wore a simple white shirt and jeans, clothes that made him look younger, closer to the man she remembered from childhood. When he saw her, he stood up and walked towards the entrance without resistance, like someone finally finding peace after years of internal war. "Ethan Hayes, you are under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, and active corruption," Maya said loudly, in front of colleagues and superiors. The words came out automatically, but each syllable cut her throat like ground glass. "Understood," he replied calmly, extending his hands for the handcuffs without drama. When the cold metal touched his wrists, he looked directly into her eyes and whispered softly, just for her to hear, "Thank you." What followed were 6 months of intensive investigation that shook the foundations of organized crime in Miami. The information provided by Ethan led to the arrest of dozens of people, including 3 judges, 5 law enforcement agents, 2 state representatives, and a network of businessmen moving over $100 million a year in illicit activities. Maya became the youngest agent to lead an operation of that magnitude, gaining national recognition and a promotion that elevated her to a prominent position in the FBI. But professional success couldn't fill the void she felt every time she visited Ethan in prison to take new depositions. The official visits were always formal, recorded, with lawyers present. They exchanged necessary information for the case, maintained the required professional demeanor, but there was an unspoken tension that hung in the air between them. Ethan was thinner, paler, but his eyes held the same intensity as always. It was during one of these visits, in the 5th month of his incarceration, that he asked her a question that caught her off guard. "Will you wait for me?" Maya stopped writing in her notebook and looked at him, confused. "Wait for what? Will you wait for me to get out? My lawyer said that with the cooperation and the plea deal, I could get between 8 and 12 years. With good behavior, I'll be out in 6. You'll be 34 when I get out. There's still time to start over." The question left her speechless. For all those months, she had focused on work, on the investigations, on her skyrocketing career. She hadn't stopped to think about the future, about what would happen when the entire criminal process was over, and she no longer had a professional excuse to see him. "Ethan, this is crazy," she said finally. "You can't ask me to wait 6 years. I'm not asking," he replied. "I'm asking if you want to." The answer was on the tip of her tongue, but she couldn't say it. Wanting and being able to were completely different things, and the chasm between them seemed insurmountable. The turning point came from where they least expected it. During one of the final court hearings, as Ethan testified about the last operations he helped dismantle, a group of armed men tried to storm the federal courthouse. The rescue attempt was poorly planned and quickly contained by security, but it made it clear that even in prison, Ethan was still considered a threat by his former associates. It was her section chief who suggested transferring him to the witness protection program. "He's already given up everyone, Maya. There's nothing more he can do for us here. But if something happens to him before the final judgment, half the convictions could be overturned for lack of a principal witness." The proposal was simple. Ethan would serve the rest of his sentence in a maximum security prison in another state with a new identity, far from the reach of the enemies he had made in Miami. In return, he would maintain his cooperation until all proceedings were finalized. And after, Maya asked in the meeting where they discussed the details. "After that, he's a free man to start a new life," the chief replied. "New identity, new documents, new past. It's as if Ethan Hayes ceases to exist." That night, Maya got special authorization for an extraordinary visit. She found Ethan in the empty visiting room. No cameras, no recorders, just the two of them and the most important decision of their lives. "You're going to accept the protection," she said. It wasn't a question. "Do you think I should?" "I think you should have the chance to live a normal life, away from all this." "And you? What's your choice?" Maya took a deep breath before answering. "I requested a transfer to FBI headquarters. They accepted. I'll be working in Washington, D.C., fighting organized crime at a national level. D.C. is far from Miami," he observed. "It is, but it's not far from Montana, where they're transferring you." The silence that followed was filled with possibilities. Ethan leaned forward, getting as close to her as the rules allowed. "Maya, are you sure about what you're doing? You have a brilliant career here, recognition, a guaranteed future. You can't throw all that away for me." "I'm not throwing anything away," she said firmly. "I'm making a conscious choice, and my choice is you." Not the criminal you were, not the childhood cousin I lost. You, the man who had the courage to give up everything to do the right thing. The man who taught me it's never too late to start over. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to burn that moment into his memory forever. When I get out, I won't be Ethan Hayes anymore. I'll be someone else, with another name, another story. Can you accept that? The name doesn't matter, she replied. What matters is who you are inside. And that person I've already learned to love. It was then that Maya knew she was making the right decision. Not because it was easy or safe, but because for the first time in her life, she was following her heart instead of her head. Choosing love over career, hope over fear. 3 years later, in a small town in rural Montana, a federal agent named Maya Jones married an agricultural engineer named Gabriel Miller. Few guests attended the simple ceremony. Just a few of her work colleagues and neighbors he had won over with his kindness and honest work on local sustainability projects. Maya's family never knew the whole truth about Ethan's disappearance or his new life. To them, he was still dead, and she had found love with a good man who made her happy. It was simpler that way, safer for everyone. On their wedding night, lying on the porch of the simple house they built together, watching the stars in the clear country sky, Gabriel took Maya's hand and intertwined his fingers with hers. "Do you regret anything?" he asked. "That I met you as a criminal instead of an honest man from the start," she replied. "That we lost so many years fighting against fate instead of embracing it. That you carried so much weight alone when we could have found a solution together. And I regret taking so long to understand that courage isn't living without fear," he said. "It's doing the right thing even when you are afraid. You taught me that." Maya turned to look at him, the man who had been her cousin, her enemy, her informant, her love, and was now her husband and life partner. The scars of the past were still there, they probably always would be, but they had stopped hurting. Instead, they had become part of the story of overcoming for two people who found in each other the strength to be better than they ever imagined possible. "I love you, Gabriel Miller," she whispered. "I love you, Maya Miller," he replied. And for the first time since childhood, they were both completely at peace. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.